Welcome to the Tip Channel. That is perfection.
Chapter 3, Kitchen Designing. Can I teach you everything about kitchen designing in a 30-minute video? Probably not. You're going to make some mistakes along the way, and mistakes are sometimes your best teacher, especially if they're a costly one. Now, I started designing kitchens over 40 years ago, and this is where I started at, on a drafting table. Everything was done by hand. Everything was done on a half-inch scale. Basically, we did a floor plan drawing, and the floor plan drawing was mainly what we sold off of. If we had the time and we had a higher-end client, we may occasionally do an elevation drawing, but they're very time-consuming. So you're sitting down with a client, you've got a floor plan, and you're looking into the lady's eyes and telling her she's going to have a wall cabinet right beside of her sink area that's going to be 36 inches wide, 30 inches high. It's going to have 2 doors on it. She's looking in your eyes, and you can tell she has no idea what you're talking about. But she's not buying a kitchen. She's buying you. Remember the very first thing about selling. You have to sell yourself. But back then, this was a little old lady. She raised 6 kids with a 5-foot metal sink base, a stove, and a refrigerator. So when you put her in an entire kitchen, she was on top of the world. Unfortunately, those little old ladies aren't around anymore. Sorry about that. Most people don't use the drafting board anymore in order to sell kitchens. They use computer designs. Naturally, if you don't do computer designs, you're going to be a step below your competition right out of the gate. So the computer designs are very good at conveying your idea to your client. Now, if you're new in the industry and you're looking at softwares available out there, and in my lifetime, I've ran just about everything, MVC 2000, Planet, 2020. They're all great programs. Problem is naturally cost. Most of them are around the $2,000 or more range, and they require an annual contract. They charge you for using their support system and things like that. So very, very costly. Is it necessary to do that? The more expensive programs do have the functionality of being able to price out the kitchen for you. So that's a nice feature, but again, very, very costly. Right now, the software that I am using is by Chief Architect, and it's Home Interior. So for a couple $100, you have a nice program to be able to design the kitchen for the client. Now, it can be very costly to continuously buy ink and print everything out as a presentation for your client. A couple ways of dealing with that is that you can go ahead and do your designs, send it to them by email and let them to review it. I personally don't like that. I like to sit down with them. So if you have a large tablet, something that you can pull the pictures up on and show them, or naturally a computer or what have you, you can bring it up and again convey what you're doing is a very good tool. And starting your kitchen design, where do you start at? Well, first of all, most kitchens have a sink, and the sink is underneath of the window. Clients like the sink under the window, so let's start with that. Now, first of all, you want the sink dead center of that window to look the nicest. So run your calculations, get the sink base underneath of the window. What size of cabinet should you use? For the double bowl sink, 36 inches is ideal. Can you go smaller than 36? Yes. You can step down to a 33, but what has to happen is your installer has to mount the sink in the countertop before he sets the countertop on top of the cabinets. The reason being is he won't be able to get to the sink clips under the sink if you go with a 33. Now you can actually step down to a 30-inch cabinet if you're really crunched for space. Now, with a 30-inch cabinet, what has to happen is that your installer has to take and cut the sides of the sink base on both left and right for the depth of the bowl. So it is possible. Now, in regards to ordering that cabinet, a lot of manufacturers will order it with a center stile. That means it has a piece of wood between the two doors, or they're offered in butt doors, meaning the two doors butt together. Now, always order butt doors. You want to make it easy for your installer to get underneath of there and hook up the sink. So that's very, very important. Next up to the sink area, dishwasher. Dishwasher right next to the sink. You don't want to put the dishwasher somewhere else where the client will want to rinse off a dish and then take it over to the dishwasher. They're tracking water across the floor. So ideally, dishwasher right next to the sink. Dishwashers are typically 24 inches. So you want a 24-inch space for that dishwasher. Next up, ideally, if the client wants that trash can pull out, again, right next to the sink is a great place for that trash can pull out because we want to scrape some food off, rinse off the plate, and then go into the dishwasher. So if it's possible, the trash can pull out would be my next favorite next to the sink. After that's a stack of drawers. Now, a stack of drawers, again, if we can get that kind of close to the sink, I like a 4-drawer base myself. It gives them room for all their utensils and stuff coming right out of the dishwasher, going right into that drawer base. So a very important piece. Next up, corner cabinets. Now, for the wall cabinet, I typically always do a diagonal corner wall cabinet. That means it's on an angle across the face. You open up the door and it's full access right into the corner. Clients that have had blind cabinets absolutely hate them because things get shoved back into the blind that they never find again. So blind corners are definitely something you don't want in your design. So diagonal corner for the wall cabinet. Down below, I typically do a L-shaped corner. You can get cabinets on a diagonal as well, but I typically do an L-shaped corner. Now, here again, we're getting full access into the cabinet. That would be called an easy reach cabinet. You open the two doors on the cabinet and you can get into the cabinet very easily. Now, in hinging those doors, keeping in mind if you have an appliance on either side, a lot of manufacturers will offer what's called piano hinge. And basically, that will mean one door will be hinged to the other, and then, excuse me, the hinge is only on one side. So you hinge those away from the appliance, because if you open up the door on an L cabinet, it's going to hit on the appliance and make it difficult for the client to get in. So in that particular case, appliance on either side, do a piano hinge. Now, next thing for the interior of that cabinet. Lazy Susans. Lazy Susans in the past have been total garbage. By the way, they are renaming them now. Evidently, some person named Susan got offended, so now they're referring to them as Lazy Daisies. I don't know about Daisy, if she's going to get offended or not, but right now, sort of the things that they're doing. But anyways, Lazy Susans in the past, total garbage. They've been attached to the doors. Little ones play with them. They get their fingers pinched in them. People would put a lot of weight in them. They get off balance. They start binding. They'd have ones that rotated inside that were just plastic. They would start to bust. People hate them. If it's available to you, get what's referred to as I refer to as a Super Susan. Now, a Super Susan is the first one that's ever made sense for a corner. And what I'm talking about, it's a 32-inch diameter shelf with a kidney cut out of it naturally for the L shape, but 32-inch diameter. It's literally taking up almost every inch of that corner. Now, these things run on a 12-inch ball bearing mechanism. You can literally bring them out and almost stand on them. They'll take that type of weight. But they're typically made out of plywood. They'll have a wood band around the edge to keep things from falling off. Customers absolutely love the Super Susan cabinet. So if it's available, plan it in your design. Now, next up, range space. Now, if they're using a typical range, what you're looking at is the range is going to be 30 inches wide. So what you want to do is you want about 30.5 for the opening of the range. That allows you room for a little bit of countertop overhang on both the left and right. Now, above the range, if the client is wanting a Space Saver microwave, they refer to it as an over-the-range microwave. It has the fan and light, everything's built into the bottom of it. What you want to look at is you want a 15-inch high cabinet above that. That places that just at the right height. So what you're looking at is that it makes it a very nice height for people to reach, doesn't get too high, doesn't get too close to the stove. Now the customer is requesting a cooktop and wall oven. Cooktops and wall oven is something the industry really never came to a standard on. They're all over the place. Cooktops will be 30 inches, 36 inches. They'll go bigger, bigger, depending on what the client's looking at. So you want basically a sink-based cabinet, maybe referred to as a range-based range-base in your catalog, but it's typically the same as your sink base. It has a false front. If you get into the higher end cabinets, you may find some that offer with a scoop drawer, meaning they scoop the drawer underneath of the cooktop, so it's still usable. It's nice for like knives and things like that. So scoop drawer is nice if it's available from your manufacturer and it works with the cooktop that they're choosing. Wall ovens. Again, wall ovens all over the place in regards to size. They started out in the old days with a 24-inch oven. Any lady that had that hated that because it wasn't as big as what a normal range is. So nowadays, they're typically going with like a 30-inch cabinet, a 30-inch oven, sorry. So what size cabinet do you plan? Some manufacturers you can do a 30, but some of them are doing 3/4 sides, which doesn't give you enough interior space to fit the 30-inch oven in. I suggest a 33-inch. Now, those are available in a lot of different combinations. You can get them for a single oven. You can get them for a double oven. You can get them for with a microwave above and a oven underneath of it. There even came out with one where the microwave is both microwave and convection. So it's like having two ovens and a microwave. So the industry keeps going on and on and on. If they like the idea of a microwave drawer, again, there are different sizes for different cabinets. Most manufacturers are offering that cabinet now. It has a drawer at the bottom and then has a space in for the microwave. They make it trimmable so you can cut it a little bit. So you want to look at the opening size that they're offering, make sure it's going to work accordingly with your microwave, or your installer can trim the opening to work with the microwave. Typically in regards to size, you can get about a 30-inch cabinet. Next up is refrigerator space. Now, I typically try to plan the refrigerator when it is possible next to a doorway or something like that. The reason being is that if you're forced to put the refrigerator down in a corner where you're right up against the wall, a lot of times a customer wants a side-by-side refrigerator, which whenever they open up the door, they're not able to get their crisper drawers out. So if you have to plan it next to a wall, you want a little bigger space to try to allow for that. Or if you've got the room, you could do like an 18-inch utility cabinet and then the refrigerator. But ideally, if you can put it at the end of a run next to a doorway, that works very, very well. Now, what I like to do is customers absolutely hate the cabinet above the refrigerator. They think it's totally worthless. You've got to reach way back over the refrigerator to get to the doors. So they end up putting up their Christmas dishes or something like that up there. So what I do instead is I do what's called an RW cabinet. All that simply means is instead of being 12 inches deep, it comes out 24 inches in depth, the same depth as a base cabinet. So it makes it a lot easier to get to those doors. It's a nice deep cabinet, makes a great place for paper towels. You can put dividers in it for cookie sheets, serving trays, muffin pans, things like that. So it's a very workable cabinet. Now, what you want to keep in mind is that a lot of the big side-by-side refrigerators go 35 3/4. So it's very tough to even get them into 36 inches in space because typically you're going to be next to a countertop and your countertop's going to have a little bit of overhang that's going to go into that refrigerator space. So I typically try to plan a minimum of 37 inches. How you achieve that is naturally a 36-inch cabinet and a 1-inch filler. Now, the 1-inch filler, basically I normally do because I'm doing a refrigerator side panel. What that is, it's a 24-inch deep panel. It goes from the floor all the way to the top of that cabinet. It does two things. Number one is that it supports that cabinet. The second thing is it gives that refrigerator a nice built-in look. The refrigerator always looks like such a big old box in the kitchen. So by using the deep cabinet and refrigerator side panel, give it a nice look, and you make that cabinet very usable for the client. Now, you may have a high-end client that is wanting an under-counter wine cooler. Now, I've seen these in all different types of sizes, 15 inches, 18 inches, 24 inches. So naturally, you want to check the specification of the under-counter refrigerator your client is buying to make sure that you have the space for that. Trash compactors. Most people don't use them anymore. Again, that's something where there's different sizes available. There's a 12, there's a 15, there's an 18. I think they even make a 21-inch trash compactor. Again, not a real big seller anymore. Trash can pullouts. Single trash can pullout typically is about an 18-inch cabinet. Getting into the double, you can get it in a 21, sometimes a 24, depending upon your manufacturing device that they're using. A lot of people like the same cushion close mechanism that they have on their drawers on the trash can pullout. That's typically taking up about 3/4 of an inch on each side, so it takes up a little more room versus a side mount track. So a lot of that has to do with how wide the cabinet will need to be in order to do a double. I think that covers all of the appliances and sort of the rules for them, if you will. Excuse me, some of the other things that you want to note in regards to designing a kitchen is that if you are planning a kitchen that you're going from wall to wall, so we got cabinets all the way across on the bottom, never ever figure it to be an exact dimension. It's not going to happen. Cabinets tend to grow, corners are out of square, they're out of level. You're going to need some field play. So somewhere along that line, you're going to have a filler in there that can be trimmed to make the dimension work accordingly. So wall to wall, always have some type of field play. Now, if you get yourself in a bind, it's like, wow, I got too many cabinets. What do I do? Do I have to order a new cabinet? There is an adjustment that you can make, but it is time consuming. It's difficult to do out the job without a good router. And what I'm talking about is that frame cabinets typically have about a 1/4 inch reveal on them, meaning that the style of the cabinet sticks out approximately a 1/4 of an inch from the side. So your installer can take and trim off that style, to grab you, a couple of inches in a couple cabinets. You might be able to get an inch or so by doing that, but plan the filler and you won't have that hassle. Heights of cabinets. Now, typical if you're using 30-inch high wall cabinets, the top of that cabinet is going to be at 7 foot. Now, if you're in a kitchen that for some reason the bulkhead is a little lower than that, the cabinets you're going to watch is the one above the range and the one above the refrigerator. They will get you into problems. Typically, if it is a correct height, that bulkhead is going to be set at 84 inches off the floor, 7 foot. Everything's going to work for you just fine. Is that bulkhead going to be perfect? No. You want to plan some type of scribe molding along the top there to cover up any gaps that are going to be there. Scribe molding is even good if you don't have a bulkhead and you're still using a standard 30-inch high cabinet. There may be a variation in the cabinet heights, or your installer might get it just perfectly even on the top. That trim kind of finishes things off, gives it a little bit of a touch of something. What I like to normally do if they're not doing a bulkhead is to end the cabinets with a piece of crown. Crown moldings are great. It really gives a lot of architectural detail to a kitchen, really dresses it up. So a piece of crown is nice. They'll come in different sizes. The larger crowns, about 3 1/4 inches is what they take up in height. So next up is what if the customer wants to go all the way to the ceiling to grab that additional storage space all around the kitchen? Definitely is possible. What you're looking at is a 42-inch high cabinet. It would go all the way up to the ceiling, and then you would just have a small piece of trim up at the top. If they like the idea of crown moldings, then you'd want a 39-inch high cabinet and then put a 3-inch crown at the top. Now, if it's not exactly 96 inches, let's just say it's 97 inches. Now, what do I do? How can I make that work with a piece of 3-inch crown molding? Well, what you do is you buy yourself a piece of wooden base off the manufacturer. You put it up first. You're probably going to need a blocker up there to hold that into place and then attach your crown molding to that. So it's what's referred to as sort of a step trim at the very top of the cabinet. So it is possible to do that. You can even do the step trims for a little more of architectural detail, even if it's not that way. Now, if you're shorter than 96, then you need to start to watch yourself. You may want to go to a smaller crown molding. And a lot of it depends also on the reveal. And what I'm talking about is that a lot of manufacturers are going to what's referred to as a full overlay on the doors nowadays. That means instead of like the old days, there was normally about 1.5 inches above the door where you can attach your moldings and stuff. The doors will go all the way up except of 1/4 inch. Now, what do? I'm too tight. So it makes it sometimes very difficult to work with crown moldings and stuff with that full overlay because you can only overlap that cabinet about 1/8 of an inch. If you don't have a bulkhead, you're not going all the way to the ceiling, you can take a 2x4 or 2x2s and screw that to the top of the cabinet and then attach your crown molding and you'll actually be nailing into that 2x2. So that is a way to make that work. Another look right now that's hot in the industry is what's referred to as staggered cabinets. And what that means is different height cabinets throughout the entire room. Now, the one thing that you want to watch as you're doing staggered cabinets, if you're planning crown moldings, the cabinets that are going taller, you want them to be deeper. In other words, a diagonal corner wall cabinet, if you're stepping up in height, it should also step out in depth. That allows the crown molding to come over and dive right into the side of the cabinet. Again, if you plan that deep cabinet above the refrigerator, it's already deeper. So the crown molding can come over and dive right into the side of the cabinet. So again, that's a nice cabinet to stagger up. So diagonal corners are good. You want to go to 15 deep instead of the 12 deep to allow the crown moldings to run into the side of that cabinet. Now, if it's not possible to do the staggered effect and increase the depth of the cabinet, there is what's referred to as a crown return, and that's going to be almost impossible for me to explain to you. But basically what it is that you take and right next to the cabinet it's coming up against, you put a filler strip in and then you cut your crown just like you're turning a corner and you're returning back into that filler strip that's right even with the face of your cabinet. Now, the disadvantage of that is that, again, that's at a 90-degree angle. So if you open up the door beside of that, that could hit on that piece of crown. So what you have to do instead of that, in that case of scenario, is to do a 45-degree angle back into that filler. So you'd have two 22.5-inch cuts, which would allow you to bring that crown molding back into the face of the cabinet and not interfere with the cabinets next to it. So it becomes a lot more difficult for your installer if you don't do the staggered depths as you're doing the staggered heights. Now, the customer may want to have some glass doors in the kitchen, which is great. What you want to keep in mind is when you go to order them, you want to order them with a matching interior so it matches the outside of the cabinet. If that is something that's not available, you want to let the client know right away that the interior of the cabinet is going to be slightly different in color. A customer might like the idea of glass doors, but the husband looks at the wife and says, the way you keep your cabinets organized, you really want people to see that? There is a way of doing that, naturally. Do the glass doors, but use a distorted glass. You can't really see what's going inside of the cabinet. It's just a nice look. Other things in the kitchen area. A customer may want a peninsula or a center island. A peninsula is one that comes out from the wall, and a center island actually sits in the middle of the floor. Now, in regards to a center island, how much space do you need around it? Well, what I sort of look at is this. ADA compliance is 36 inches. 36 inches leaves enough room for two people to pass each other in the kitchen. So that's sort of my rule of thumb, is 36 inches. I'll get into ADA a little bit later, but 36 inches I like around a center island. Now, let's just say, for instance, that a customer wants a cooktop in a center island. So not a problem, put a cooktop in a center island. Now, what do you do about venting? Now, you can do a hood above that coming down. Bad thing about that is that it just closes the entire kitchen in. People that have had that canopy hood, or say they have a peninsula with wall cabinets above it, absolutely hate that because the kitchen becomes so tiny filling. So instead of that, they do make what's called a downdraft system. Now, you can get that built into the cooktop, and that'd be something like a jet air system. Or they make a ventilator, which is really neat. And how it works is that you hit a button on it and it pops up out of the countertop. Now, the downdraft ventilator goes down through the floor and then to an outside wall. The one that pops up out of the countertop, keeping in mind that you're going to need space in behind of the cooktop. So you either need a deeper cabinet, or if you have a back panel on the back of the bar, it needs to go beyond that to allow for the mechanism. Or you can actually back cabinets up against each other, and that ventilator can go in the cabinet on the back side of the island. It is a nice feature. It's also a nice feature if a client is wanting a bar area on the center island and having a cooktop. The ventilator is nice because it creates a little bit of a grease shield for a person not being able to get splashed with grease. The other thing that you can do is to do high bar. Now, there's 3 different levels for a seating area in the kitchen. Number 1 is to drop the countertop down to 30 inches to the top of it, and that would be table height. And then you would use a normal chair, which the seat's at 18 inches. Next up, you can come straight off at countertop level, which is at 36 inches, and you would use the shorter bar stools. The third elevation is 42 inches, which steps up 6 inches above the countertop. Now, if you went into a commercial bar, that would be the height that you would be talking about with a 42. 42, you would use the higher bar stool where your seat's at 30 inches in height. The high bar is nice if you have a cooktop or a sink on a center island. Just protects that person sitting there from getting splashed with grease or getting splashed with water. Of course, I've seen ladies say that, well, I really like having the sink on the island. My husband gets out of hand. I spray him with the sprayer. Hey, to each his own. Anyways, center island, 36 inches around it. That gives you some nice clearance as far as getting around the island and not feeling trapped into the kitchen area. Now, you may have a client that's wanting a kick above what your manufacturer has to offer. What I'm talking about is, say for instance, they want one of these fancy hoods above the range area, and it's not available from your manufacturer. There is a company called Salici, makes some amazing looking hoods and what have you. So if you go that direction, now you need to find out whether your manufacturer has the stain available, whether you can stain and finish it to match the cabinets. A lot of times people want that to be a focal point. They want it to be, say for instance, painted or a different stain than the rest of the cabinets. They want it to stand out. So that's an option as well. A lot of times customers may want carvings or corbels or posts that again aren't available from your distributor. So what do you do then? Well, there's several different places there as well. One is Hardware Resources. They handle a lot of carvings and what have you. If you really want to look at some high-end carvings, Raymond Incabal. Incabal Designs makes beautiful wood carvings for just about any application. But there's a lot of distributors for post and what have you out there that you can get. You can get it in a different wood species. Sometimes if you're looking at a client that, say for instance, is using cherry, you can actually buy a wood species called rubber wood. Now, is it actually rubber? No, it's not rubber, but that's what they refer to it as. And you can put the stain on it, and it stains very close to cherry. So there are ways to do things that can be cost effective as well. You may have a customer request to put the wall oven or the refrigerator in the corner. Now, a refrigerator in the corner, big, no. It takes up a big chunk of space. It is possible to put the wall oven in the corner. And again, if you bring it out to where it's even with the countertops on both sides, it does take up a lot of space. It is possible to sink that oven cabinet back into the corner and then use angled fillers coming into the oven cabinet. So it takes up less space in the kitchen area and doesn't look quite so boxy. I absolutely hate corner ovens. I hate trying to put a refrigerator in the corner. Bar tops. How big should a bar top be? Well, that's going to depend a lot on the height of it. If you're looking at countertop height, then you can use just a 36-inch wide countertop. Leaves you about a 10-inch overhang on the back side, just enough to get your knees underneath of, so that keeps the footprint kind of small. If you're looking at dropping down to table height or stepping up to high bar, you're going to want a minimum of 18 inches. 18 inches allows you room for a placemat and a drinking glass. So it gives you a very comfortable amount of room for a place setting. How much room do you like to have for each person? Minimum 24 inches. I like 30 whenever it's possible, but a minimum of 24 inches. 24 is not bad if you're sitting around having drinks, drinking coffee. 30 inches gives you a little more elbow room if you're actually sitting there and eating. When designing a kitchen, most of the times it's for ladies. Ladies typically are a little shorter. Fortunately, we are becoming a much taller generation than our ancestors. But I have a lot of ladies tell me, Dawn, kitchens are designed by men. They put all the appliances down below and all the storage spaces up above, and I can't reach it. So keep that in mind when you're designing. I will occasionally try to get a man involved, and occasionally there are guys that are chefs that prefer to do all the cooking for their household, which is good too. When I do try to get some guys involved, I'm like, what is your wants in the kitchen? Well, first of all, what's it going to cost me? The second thing is, I want a trash can pull-out big enough for a pizza box. So their wants and needs, if they're not involved as a chef, most of the time are very minimal in the kitchen. An ADA kitchen. ADA stands for American Disabilities Act. It is for people that may be physically challenged. How do you lay out an ADA kitchen? Well, a couple of different things. I already touched base on a minimum of 36 inches on walkway. What you're also going to need is, if you get back into a kitchen and that person needs to spin around, you're going to need a minimum of 5 foot to take and spin a wheelchair around in the kitchen. Countertop levels. Tables, minimum of 28 inches. Countertops, I prefer 34 inches to the top of the countertop. Sink areas, you want to do what's referred to as a courtesy panel, and it's just basically a panel that'll come down and be angled. All it's doing is covering up the plumbing so that the person in the wheelchair doesn't come in and get burnt on a hot water pipe. So it's recessed back in, allows for them to wheel in underneath of the countertop. The courtesy panel covers up the plumbing. Cooktops, same thing. They need to be able to wheel underneath of a cooktop. So the cooktops work a lot better for a person in a wheelchair than what a range is, because naturally they can't get underneath of a range. Wall ovens, naturally you want to place them in a cabinet that it's only about, say, 18 inches off the floor. So whenever it's down, they can comfortably get something out of it. Keeping in mind, they're going to have to take things out from the side, not from the front. Dishwashers. Dishwashers you want to elevate. In other words, it needs to be higher. They're not going to be able to get way down next to the floor to get things out. So an elevated dishwasher works very, very well. There are manufacturers out there that make ADA compliance cabinets, and what they are is naturally shorter, as I mentioned, to get that height that you need for the countertop. And then they also have a higher toe kick, so the person in the wheelchair's feet can get underneath of the toe kick. That concludes Chapter 3. Please proceed on to Chapter 4. And if you're finding this informative, please like and subscribe. and have a great day.